Hello again, gamers and gamettes, and welcome to another episode of Not So Hardcore Gaming. Today, we're going to be talking about Need for Speed Heat. Now, on the podcast previously, I have spoken about Need for Speed Payback. It's the first Need for Speed game I have spoken about, and I think if I'm being honest, it was the first Need for Speed game I completed the whole story of. And this is now the second Need for Speed game I will be talking about. And, you know, I've got a little bit to say on it. To do something a little bit different, I've taken more specific notes about this game as I've been playing it, which I'll mention throughout. And without further ado, let's begin. So, to begin with, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to mention a little bit about the story first. Now, the reason I decided to say this first is, honestly, there wasn't much of a story for this game. If I'm, from my perspective, I found it to be a little bit same. There wasn't much story, and there's no real focus on the story. For me, it felt just less important as I was playing it. You know, that it just never hooked me in, and it was a bit of a shame. All I really got throughout the campaign was cop bad, racer good, or less bad. There wasn't a hell of a lot I found it did differently. It felt like other games that I knew of. So, yeah, that's just what I wanted to first mention. I found the story underwhelming, and that's one of the few times I can say this. It just wasn't for me. Moving swiftly on, as I don't want to dwell, visuals and audio. Now, starting off, I will mention one note that I took down, which was almost immediately. In this game, you can't edit the visuals much. Any other game I've played, you can turn the brightness up or down. In this game, you can't. Now, when I spoke to a friend about it, he mentioned, it runs off what you've got on the settings of your console. And it's sort of, you can change it if you change, the settings on your TV, which, he mentioned it saves a bit of storage room. Now, when it comes to that type of stuff, I don't really know what I'm talking about. So the way I looked at it, not being able to change the brightness setting, it was inconvenient, but not a deal breaker. So that's just a little mention for you. Continuing on, the visuals in terms of the cityscape, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. There's a fair ways. The map is fairly big. It goes, throughout the bustling city. Then it's got more of a sparse region. I think it's a bit of a smaller map than Payback, which, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a note. But the amount that there is a good enough amount. There's a good amount to see. Little variations. Enough to keep you interested, not enough to be overdoing it, The next visual thing to talk about is the cars. The cars are designed beautifully, being able to edit the wrap, you can make them more shiny or less shiny. There's a good amount of visual customization you can add to your cars, and then, being able to add all of the decals, the wraps, it gives a lot. And obviously, as it is a racing game, that's where most of the visual work is put in, is into the cars. It wouldn't make sense otherwise. As I said, there's a good amount of customization. There's a lot you can see. Great. Next thing is the audio. The voice acting for the game, I found quite good. Again, when it comes to a lot of this stuff, I'm not that critical, if I'm being honest. There's a lot of the time I will look at things and I'll be like, yeah, it's alright. That's about it. So I don't have any genuine criticisms about it, but I don't have any glowing reviews when it comes to, voice acting. It was there. More importantly, the sounds of the cars, great range for it. Being able to, and this is another cool detail, you can edit how the car sounds, which I kind of like that detail. I can't say it's realistic. I'm not a cars person. You couldn't be asking anyone worse about it. But it's fun to be able to edit the sound of it, make your own custom sounding engine. It's pretty cool. It's a cool little detail. Obviously, I like, as you go a different type of car, it sounds just that little bit different. The faster the car, the different the sound. There's little changes, which is just enough. That's about all there is, and we'll move to more about the cars in a moment. But the last thing I want to mention is the extra effects of it. The tire smoke, being able to choose between a couple colors, the nitrous color. They're very minor details you can change, which, you look at it and you think, hey, that's pretty cool. It's not essential. It's cool to have it there, but it doesn't add a lot. It's a cool little detail that can give you that extra little satisfaction modifying it, and that's about all there is to say in terms of car customization. Next, we'll talk about the range of cars. Now, one thing I think was done significantly better on this, not in terms of realism, but in terms of gameplay itself, is you don't have to go to one of 4 different car brand, well, not brands, but different dealerships. In Payback, you had to get a different car for drift, a different car for when you want to get away from the cops, which, as I would have said, is slightly more realistic. For this one, it fits better because it's a game. You don't want it to be too monotonous, so you've got one dealership that you get your cars from, and instead you change the tires to be better for drifting. That, I think, is a much better way to do things, because otherwise it just gets tedious. So definitely they went the right way with that. I trailed off there. My mind does that quite a bit. The selection of cars, I think there's a good amount of them, and obviously you've got things, and this is one thing I always find a bit more of a funny detail. You can get little grabby cars, like Beetles and stuff like that, and you look at it and you think, that's not really what you'd call a racing car. And I've never known anyone to choose one of those cars and make that their main car, but it's kind of cool to have it there. It's a relatively minor detail that I find a little bit fun, but I think, nah, I'd never do that. But obviously, it's better to have the cool car selection and being able to go and pick just about any car and upgrade it. You can upgrade it a lot. It's fun. It's a cool little note. It's fun to be able to choose any car you want, and all of them can be pretty good race cars if you put enough work into them. Now, I like, obviously, to go for certain cars that start off fairly good. The main car I've used throughout the game is the Acura, I think. It's one I found was easily customizable. When I went later, I went for the Regara, which is a Koenigsegg, and I know I probably butchered that name, but honestly, I found that car to be a little bit disappointing when I went to it. In Need for Speed Payback, it was a little bit less realistic because of how it handled. Now, a lot of this stuff I say because I have a friend who's definitely a cars enthusiast, and he will often tell me these things, oh yeah, it's realistic, and he always appreciates the realism. But for me, because I don't know what I'm talking about, I've never even driven a real car because of my disability, although I will one day. I genuinely don't know when something is realistic or not, but it's a cool note to look at. And as all of this stuff, it's through a filter. He tells me these things and I try to make note of them to talk about it, because I know there are a lot of people out there who want realism. But back to the point I was saying, I found it to be slightly disappointing because I wasn't getting any better race times because it being more difficult to control. I lost control of it a bit more, and it didn't feel as good. So I ended up going back to the Acura, and that's been my main car since. So for me, I usually stick to, I'll have maybe 5 different cars throughout a game that I stick to, but knowing I have that selection is good. And as you get each car, it'll have certain body modifications you can do to make it look a little bit different, which adds character to the car, I guess. It's cool. You can get one specific type of car, and there are a lot of different designs you can use just from body modification, that you can have a unique car to most people. Then obviously the wraps, you've got different paint styles as well as many different decals. There is a lot of customization you can do, which I think that's essential for any racing game. Is you have to be able to do whatever you can for it. You need to be able to have that option so that by the end of it, you have one car, you design it your own way. No one else in the world will have that exactly the same as you. That's a really cool thought to me, that every extra bit they put into it means there's that many more different combinations you can make of a single car. And they have hundreds of decals. When you look at that, there are millions of different combinations of everything put together. It's just, to me, such a cool thought that every different car you make is completely unique. That's always just boggles my mind, So I wanted to briefly mention both the car selection as well as the customization options are absolutely phenomenal for this. It's one of the best things about any race car game, and EA, who obviously publishes these games, they seem to do that very, very well. Moving on, we'll go back a little bit. As I've said earlier, not having that many different dealerships makes the game a bit more simple, which is fun. Like, more fun to me, personally. And that is what this point is next, is the simplicity of things. While I did enjoy the other customization options in Payback, having different dealerships, it definitely added, like, it changed the game a little bit, where it almost felt like a completely different game. But having the simplicity in there, I think they did better. It felt a little bit less tedious. The simplicity just seemed to fit the game better. So I just wanted to make a brief mention of that the game does it better in that respect. The simplicity is a better fit for this game. The next thing that I wanted to talk about here is the different systems of rep and money, like reputation and money. Having the option, you have nighttime racing and daytime racing, and both of them, the daytime has different races to the nighttime. I liked that. It means there's a lot more you can do in the game, and at night you get that extra little challenge where you have to beat the cops as well. That, to me, was really very well designed, and the fact that, as I said, at nighttime the city looks completely different. It's almost like playing a different map, and that's always interesting to me. It's the same layout, exactly the same layout, yet to me it feels like a completely different map, and it makes it feel a lot larger. I don't know why it does that to me, and a lot of people probably wouldn't feel the same, but for me, it adds a lot, and it does feel completely different. Obviously, as well, the gameplay is different because you are not just, racing, you're driving fast. You have to have a lot of control. You have to be able to change directions very quickly to get away from the cops. The difficulty goes up at night time. The gameplay, to me, changes completely, and it adds a lot more to do. And then, when you look at it, the higher your rep, the better parts you can get access to, the more cars you can get. It gives you a reason to go out at night time. It gives you reason to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take that risk. And when you lose at night, you lose all that rep, you look at it and sure, it kind of sucks, but you have a reason to get back out there and do it again. And it's well motivated, it's well designed. The system of money and rep, to me, was designed beautifully. I loved being able to find motivation for that. On a lot of other games, I'll look at it and I just can't be bothered doing something. Even if I know it unlocks things, I just think to myself, it's a bit too tedious, and I don't end up doing that as much, which means I don't play the game as much. But this was done well enough that I was able to reason with myself and say, alright, I'll go and do this, even though I don't like it as much as this. I got to do it to be able to do more. You know what I mean? My brain just works differently to a lot of people's, but that's how it went with me. That's how I thought of things. The next part of that, as it all that was the more basic stuff. But I like when you get to the highest rep levels, you unlock ultimate parts, and that has a different system to the rest. You have to go and compete in high heat races. Now, as I somehow managed to omit, heat is it goes from a level of 0 to 5, and the higher your heat level, the more cops will chase you and the more difficult it will be. And then when you want to get ultimate parts, you have to be at either heat level 3 or heat level 5. You have to complete the race in, I think, usually about 4th or higher to get an ultimate part. And then you also have to make it back safely to your safe house to collect that new part. And I liked the way that was done, because it meant if you really want to experience the game at its finest, if you really want to, go out and get the best cars, you had to do that. And it kept me interested. And that's often a difficult thing to do. For me, my mind is always wandering off whenever I'm doing something. Keeping me interested and invested is not the easiest thing to do, so I commend them for that. That was well done on their part. The way the races were, just the way they were done was really quite impressive. As the different play styles, the different sections of the game, I guess, really kept drawing me in, Now that I've spoken about all the different aspects of the game, I wanted to mention a few little notes that I took down. Usually when I've been talking about a game previously, because I was very new to this sort of thing, I was in a different mindset, and more recently I thought to myself, I better start taking some notes so I can talk about little grievances or commendations that I can make about the game. So I've written a few down, and I'll now take a moment to mention what they are. One of the first things that I started when I began the game, I mentioned the note earlier, not being able to edit the brightness. That we've already talked about. And of the notes I had that I think took away from the game, what I wrote down was, I think the other races talk a little bit too much. Now, obviously, because of the type of game it is, they have to talk to be able to tell you what's going on, and I get that. But when you're doing a certain race, I feel like them talking too much takes your mind off it. It affects your concentration, and for me, that was not that good to me. I did not like how much they were talking. That it's a relatively minor thing, but something that I felt I needed to mention. But now we've got a few good notes, things I did better. When I took down the notes, I was often comparing to what I knew from Need For Speed Payback. It sort of, when I saw a few things I thought they did wrong in Need For Speed Payback, and I looked at it now and I thought they did that a lot better. I've got a couple of those. The first of which for me is the absolute biggest thing, being able to use live tuning during a race. I hated not being able to do that in Need For Speed Payback, because when you're just roaming around in your car, the game is completely different to what it is during a race. And if you tune while you're outside a race and you go into one of your races and you start going around, you think to yourself, okay, this needs to be changed slightly, and you would have to quit the race, tune, and go back in. That was tedious, and I genuinely, that was probably the biggest critique I could make on that. Whereas this game, you can do it at any time. And it just makes it a little bit more convenient. It helps in every different type of race as well, because there are a few different. Being able to adjust during the race is a must. You have to be able to do that. And boy, I'm glad they fixed that. Let's put it that way. For me, the next thing, obviously, because as I've mentioned, there were different dealerships for drifting, that, and whatever else. I feel like the whole drifting aspect of the game in Payback was just, it wasn't there for me. But when playing this game, you can drift in any car, and that to me just feels a lot more fun. You know, I like being able to drift, even though, and you can trust me on this, I suck at it. It's good fun. And as I said, like, being able to go around corners drifting, especially when you've got tyre smoke, it's beautiful to look at. It feels good, and you have so much more control over that now. And it's just one extra little icing on the cake, you know? Next note I made, and this is in terms of a story aspect, when you're playing the game, the cops are as despisable as possible. And I think, you know, that has to be, when you've got someone you need to fight in the game, you have to have more reason to fight against them, you know? And this game, it does that well. That's one of the biggest notes for it. These cops are so easy to hate. So those are three of the biggest notes I made, and the very last note, which will be basically the end of the episode, editing your racer in terms of visual customization. Now, you've got more characters to choose from. I like that. In Need for Speed Payback, it made sense that you couldn't do that because, you know, there was more of a story there. This one, there's not as much of a focus on the story. So your character, you can choose from one of many, but after you've chosen which character you want to be, there's more you can do to customize. You know, you've got different hats, which also affects the hair, and that's one thing for me, being able to edit your hair, I like in any game. Now, for reference, I am a man who likes long hair. I've had long hair for a long time. I like the look of it. Being able to use either a hat where it has long hair, or, which I found recently when I was re-editing it, a nice long hair look. It's a good little detail. I like being able to do that. But the clothes themselves, you know, being able to choose just a simple shirt and pants, it's relatively minor, and if you can't customize what they're wearing, you're not missing out on that much, but it's just that little bit cooler being able to, if that makes sense. And one thing I found, which is a good note, especially during, you know, everything that is happening in the world currently, being able to wear a mask, which in terms of the game, it was used as a, you know, if you wear a mask, you can hide your face. I like being able to put a mask on because it fits with the time, you know? That's one little funny note I thought I would mention. And yeah, I think that's everything I've written down. That's all the notes I have to say. And I've talked about every aspect of the game. In the end, this is one of the games where they did a few things wrong. And usually I'm not that critical, but even I can say, you know, I feel like this could have been done better. But there is so much to love about this game that in the end, it's one I've really enjoyed playing, and I'd happily play again, you know? That's all she wrote. Thank you for joining me again. As I said last episode, and I want to keep it in mind, I would love to have your input. If you've got something you think I missed in today's episode, or something you feel you would like to say, I would love it if you could go to my Facebook page, Not So Hardcore Gaming. That's where I think that, and my Instagram page, same name, Not So Hardcore Gaming. I would love to have some input, some of your comments, or even game recommendations. Anything you can think of, don't hesitate to give me a message. I will very happily reply, and I would love to be able to say more in the next few episodes. Thank you very much for joining me today, and without further ado, this has been Not So Hardcore Gaming. I've been Jeremy, signing off.